Good afternoon. Before I was a pastor, before I felt called to be a pastor, before I went to seminary or even chose to go to seminary or even think about seminary, I wrote my senior thesis for my bachelor's, my senior project, or whatever you want to call it, on sin. When I was finishing up at the University of Tulsa and before I went to seminary, I wrote 45 pages or so on specifically the theology of sin for John Calvin and for Karl Barth. I worked hard too. I went through bunches of revisions, tons of them on paper. By the way, track changes wasn't something that we were using with my professor. And I spent hours sitting in the library in silence, reading about and meditating about and writing about sin. Hours and hours obsessing over. The first third was about John Calvin and the second third was about Karl Barth, and then on that third third, that was my synthesis of this stuff. And I think I got like a B+ or an A- on it, somewhere in there. It didn't really matter because it just meant that I could graduate, but a grade somewhere in there. And I obsessed over this thing, writing it, talking about it with my friends, marveling over it, worrying about it. But here's the kicker. I reread it recently, a little while ago, and I learned something. I was wrong. Oh, how I was wrong too. I misunderstood the no in Barth, and I didn't understand the breadth of sin in Calvin. And my synthesis, well, I mean, because it was based on these, faulty interpretations, it too, all of it, it was just wrong. I was talking to someone about this just yesterday, actually, which is kind of why I'm confessing it to you now. But I think I was wrong. Have you ever been wrong before? No, actually, if I had thought to bring in Luther's understanding of sin into this whole work, I would have known that I'm wrong all the time. But of course I didn't, because I was wrong. But for me, what's the most aggravating, or maybe even just the most important thing about this whole process of learning of my wrongness is how I learned of my wrongness, how I learned that my paper was wrong. I learned by reading more. I read way more Calvin and way more Barth in seminary and since seminary than I ever did in my bachelor's. Which means in 5 years from now, or in 10 years from now, or in 15 or 20 or 30 or 50 years from now, I will realize I was wrong yesterday. It's a fundamental truth in life that I'm sure you've by now realized as well. We learn stuff. And when we learn stuff, we learn that we didn't understand that stuff before. But what we do with that knowledge of our wrongness, that's really what matters, because God loves us whether we're wrong or not. God loves us regardless of our understanding of Calvin's doctrine of sin. God loves us no matter when we're wrong, and no matter when we learn that we're wrong. And what we do with this knowledge of our wrongness, that matters. Are we graceful with ourselves? Are we graceful with others? Because what we said yesterday to them, well, we may live to learn that it was wrong. And are we showing God's compassion for creation in the way that we deal with ourselves and in the way that we deal with our neighbors, with humility and grace and love? Because that is never wrong. Anyway, until next time, peace be with you.